Hi there. There are lots of cheap table saws out there at the moment, and a lot of people are getting into woodworking and buying table saws with no experience of using them. And so I just want to give you a few quick tips which hopefully will help you avoid some of the dangers that go with them.
The most important message I can get across in this video is that you read all the instructions that come with your saw. Make sure you understand those instructions and follow those instructions. The manufacturer's instructions should take precedence over any other hints or tips you hear from me or anyone else.
Now I've managed to lay my hands on this table saw, which comes in at less than £200, so you get an idea of how reasonable they are these days. So one of the first points to mention is dust extraction. We've got a blade guard here with dust extraction coming off the top. Make sure that's always connected if at all possible. There's dust extraction around the back of the saw as well. Those two connect together and then onto an extractor. At the very least you should have a vacuum on the end of that. The next thing is guarding, and we've got this guard over the saw blade here. It does restrict some of the things you can do, and there are certain instances where you need to take it off to do certain cuts. But if at all possible you should keep this on. As long as it's there and it's set at the correct height, then you're not going to easily get your fingers or any other part of your body near the blade.
A riving knife sits directly behind and in line with the saw blade. It helps to prevent a cut from closing up when the internal stresses in the wood have been altered by the saw cutting through. If a saw cut closes up, then the wood will bind with the blade and it could be thrown back at the operator.
Table saws are loud, so wear hearing protection. They throw things at you, so wear eye protection. They also emit lots of dust, so wear breathing protection. If you want to rip large sheets, and this is just a small example of what this machine could cope with, you've got a couple of problems. First of all, before you get to the saw, there's so much hanging over the back, it wants to tip up. So you need to support it back here at the end. The other thing is, you haven't got much fence here to try and line this up with and keep it tight against before you enter the saw. And with you standing right back at the back of the board, it's quite difficult to steer it. What can we do to improve matters? Well, look where the saw blade starts. It's here. Transfer that across to the fence and pull the fence back so it only just passes the front of the saw. And lock it on. This has extended your fence much further back, so you've got a bigger reference there to line up your board. That makes it much easier to stop it tipping around the end of the fence, so you can concentrate on keeping it flat to the table. As you get towards the end of the cut, you'll be thinking, well, there's no fence left to support it. Well, of course, as soon as you've cut through to the riving knife will help to stop the board from wobbling side to side. And as soon as you've got through the front of the saw, your panel is then free to push out of the way of the saw. As you get through your cut, the overhang at the back of the saw is going to want to tip up. So make sure you've got an outfeed table, or as I've done here, I've got a workmate with a board clamped in it, just slightly lower than the height of the table, and my board, both the workpiece and the waste, will just slide over the top of it and it will stop them tipping forwards. But before we make the cut, we must make sure that our board's going to pass through underneath the blade guard. Blade guard's loose enough so it lifts up when the board goes in the front of it, but look, it's jamming at the back. It's not quite high enough. So let's raise it a little bit more, and now it's passing through easily. So we'll turn the extraction on and we're ready to cut. All fingers still intact. is a piece of fairly rotten pallet, and I'm just cutting it up into firewood. And I'm going to use the crosscut capability of the table saw. Now, first of all, I don't want it to bind underneath the guard, so let's make sure the blade's high enough. Now, do I just push it through, guiding it against the fence? I don't think so. It's going to wobble a lot, and that'll get chewed up in the blade, and it might get spat back at me. So I'm going to use the mitre guide. First of all, make sure it travels freely in the slot. Then make sure that the end of it doesn't contact the saw. If it's a little bit loose in the slot, as this one is, then make sure as you move the work through, you keep it pressed up against one side of the slot. Now am I ready to cut? Well, I could set the fence for the right length that I want. Surely that's the way to do it. No, no, no. If you do that, when your piece is cut off, when you get past the beginning of the blade, it'll be tight between the blade and the fence. And how do you remove it then? If you move it at all, twist it either way, it's going to bind up against the blade and it might get shot back into your face. So we need to move the fence out of the way. If you can slide your fence back, that's great. Bring it back just before the front of the saw blade, and we can cut like that. As soon as you've got the cut made, you're past the fence and you're free to move your cut off away. If your fence doesn't do that, you can either move it completely out of the way and just measure your pieces as you cut them, or why not make yourself a little gauge like this, piece of wood that rides just slightly off the bed of the table on the fence. Clamp it on so that it's in front of the blade. That way we can set our length every time exactly the same, but once we've cut it, we're past that little stop, and then we can move our work away, and then it's free to take out safely. So read all the instructions that come with your saw, follow all those guidelines, and hopefully these tips as well will help you keep hold of your fingers. Cheerio!
Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Cheerio!